Tonight, you're going to worry about whether your baby is sleeping enough, whether the room is the right temperature, whether the monitor is charged. But here's what you're not going to worry about: whether something is going to eat your child before sunrise. For 300,000 years, that was the only question that mattered. Human babies are the most defenseless creatures ever born on this planet. A newborn foal walks within hours. A newborn chimp grips its mother's fur from the first breath and holds on. A newborn human cannot lift its own head, cannot roll over, cannot make a single useful sound when a predator is nearby except the one sound that gets it killed: and crying. And yet here you are, descended from an unbroken line of those helpless infants, every single one of whom survived long enough to become a parent themselves. How? The answer is stranger, more complicated, and more humbling than anything modern parenting culture is prepared to admit. Let's start with why human babies are so helpless in the first place. Because the reason matters. The human brain is enormous relative to our body size. It is the reason we build cities, write music, and wonder about our own existence. But that brain creates a problem during birth. If a baby's skull grew to full developmental size inside the womb, it would never fit through the birth canal. The physics simply don't work, so evolution made a deal. Human babies are born with brains only about 25% developed. Chimpanzees are born at nearly 40%. That means 3/4 of everything that makes you human, your language, your memory, your capacity for complex thought, develops outside the womb, while you are completely unable to protect yourself. This is not a flaw in the design. This is the design. The price of the most powerful brain on Earth was the most helpless infant on Earth. And for hundreds of thousands of years, every mother who gave birth inherited that bargain whether she wanted it or not. A leopard can smell a newborn from a distance that would terrify you if you looked it up. Hyenas hunt in coordinated packs. Snakes don't announce themselves. An infant lying on the ground in the African savannah was not a baby resting. It was a meal waiting to happen. So how did they keep them alive? The first answer is one that most modern parents have never been told. Because it dismantles almost everything our culture tells us about parenting. They never did it alone. In 2009, anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy argued something that rearranged our entire understanding of human evolution. Humans, she said, are cooperative breeders. We are biologically designed to raise children in groups, not as a cultural preference, not as a social nicety, as a survival requirement built into our DNA over hundreds of thousands of years. Compare us to chimpanzees. A chimpanzee mother raises her infant almost entirely by herself. She carries it, feeds it, guards it for 5 years before she can even consider another pregnancy. No one else touches that infant. No one else feeds it. If another female reaches for her baby, she attacks. Humans are the opposite. Among the Ife foragers of the Congo, researchers documented infants being held by an average of 14 different individuals within a single 8-hour stretch. The mother held her own baby less than half the time. Aunts, older siblings, grandmothers, unrelated women from neighboring families, all of them carrying, soothing, feeding. Some of them nursing infants that weren't biologically theirs. Among the Aka people of Central Africa, fathers remained within arm's reach of their infants nearly half of every day. Not because it was fashionable, because this is how humans lived. The baby was always in arms. The baby was never on the ground. The baby was always touching someone. And there was a cold, biological reason for that. When our ancestors became fully bipedal millions of years ago, they lost something critical: body hair. Primate infants cling. A baby chimp wraps its fingers around its mother's fur from the first moment of life and hangs on. A human baby has nothing to grip. No fur, no mane, no coarse coat to lock fingers into. The baby is born already falling. So mothers carried them. Every hour, every day, for years. They built carrying technology. Slings fashioned from animal hides. Strips of plant fiber knotted into crude but functional harnesses. Archaeologists excavating a burial site in Italy found an infant they named Neve, resting in what appeared to be a decorated baby carrier more than 10,000 years old. She was buried with it. It mattered that much. But the carrying wasn't just about transport. It activated something inside the infant's nervous system that scientists now call the transport response. When a human baby is picked up and pressed against a warm body, its heart rate slows, its breathing steadies, its cortisol levels drop, and it stops crying. That last part is the survival mechanism. In an environment full of predators, a crying infant is a signal flare. It announces location, vulnerability, and the presence of something worth killing. A baby that goes silent the moment it is lifted against a body is a baby that doesn't draw anything in from the dark. When you pick up your screaming newborn in the middle of the night, and it suddenly, inexplicably quiets against your chest, that is not comfort. That is an ancient threat response. Reflex still operating inside your child's nervous system. The infant's body has registered, I am being carried. We are moving. The danger is being handled. It goes quiet so neither of you gets eaten. That reflex is 300,000 years old. It is still running. Right now, in your baby. Carrying kept them safe, but you also had to feed them. And the way ancient humans fed their infants would make most Modern parents deeply uncomfortable breastfeeding lasted a minimum of 2 to 3 years. In most hunter-gatherer societies, 4 years was not unusual. 6 was documented. This was not ideology. It was the only option available. There was no formula, no sterilized bottles, no clean water safe enough to give an infant without risking fatal infection. Breast milk was the only food source that was sterile, nutritionally complete, and free of the pathogens that killed children in the thousands every generation. It was also medicine. Breast milk contains antibodies specific to the bacteria and viruses. The mother has encountered a constantly updating immune library passed directly to the child. In a world with no doctors, no antibiotics, and no vaccines that living, adaptive immunity was often the only thing standing between an infant and a fatal infection. Breastfeeding also did something else. It suppressed ovulation. A mother nursing continuously would typically not conceive again for 2 to 4 years. This was not accidental. This was biology protecting both children. Because in the Paleolithic, 2 helpless infants at the same time meant almost certainly losing both of them. And when the baby finally began to need solid food, there were no jars of pureed vegetables, no rice cereal, no soft packaged foods designed for developing gums. What there was pre-mastication. The mother, or the grandmother, or the aunt, or whoever was holding the infant at that moment would take a piece of meat or a fibrous root, chew it thoroughly until it was broken down by their own saliva, softened by their own digestive enzymes, and then transfer it directly from their mouth into the baby's mouth, lip to lip, saliva to saliva. That saliva carried more than digested food. It carried immune cells, protective enzymes, microbial communities that helped establish the infant's own gut flora, a biological handshake between 2 immune systems that helped the child build resistance to exactly the pathogens circulating in their shared environment. Some anthropologists have proposed that this practice, so ancient, so universal across early human cultures, may be the evolutionary origin of kissing. Not romance, not affection. A mother feeding her child the only way she knew how, passing life directly from her body into theirs. But of all the things ancient human communities did to keep their infants alive, the most surprising and the most scientifically significant is the role of grandmothers. Here's a strange biological fact. Human women are one of the only female mammals on Earth who live for decades after they stop being able to reproduce. In most species, the body deteriorates quickly once reproduction ends. There is no evolutionary logic to keeping an organism alive after it can no longer pass on its genes. But human women routinely live 30, 40 years past menopause. Why? In the late 1990s, anthropologist Kristen Hawkes spent time with the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the few remaining hunter-gatherer populations living in a way that closely mirrors how humans lived for most of our history. She noticed something that changed. How scientists think about human longevity postmenopausal. Women were the hardest working members of the group. They were out in the heat for hours, digging up dense, calorie-rich tubers from compacted earth, food that young children could not acquire on their own, food that required strength and experience and deep ecological knowledge built over decades, and they were feeding it to their grandchildren. The effect was measurable. Mothers with active grandmothers nearby could wean their current children earlier and conceive again sooner. Grandmothers were not passengers in the community. They were engines of it. They were the reason the next generation survived long enough to become a generation at all. Hawkes called this the grandmother hypothesis. The idea is precise. Women who remained healthy and productive after menopause helped more of their grandchildren survive. Those grandchildren carried the genes for longer female lifespans. Over hundreds of thousands of years, that feedback loop selected for exactly the biology we see in human women today. Your grandmother's long life is not a medical achievement. It is an ancient evolutionary inheritance. Women live long past reproduction because grandmothers who did that exact thing were the reason our species made it. Menopause is not a system failing. It is a system activating. Now here's the part that should stop you completely. For 300,000 years, the entire span of anatomically modern human existence, no mother raised a child alone, not one. There is no precedent for it anywhere in the archaeological, anthropological, or ethnographic record. It was always a network, always a web of hands, always at least 5 to 15. People actively involved in the daily survival of a single infant. The mother was essential. She was not sufficient. Today in the industrialized world, that network has almost entirely collapsed. The multi-generational household is the exception. Extended family often lives hundreds of miles away. Neighbors don't know each other's names, let alone each other's children. Parental leave ends in weeks. Childcare is expensive, scarce, and emotionally fraught. And so a mother sits in an apartment at 3 a.m., alone, a screaming infant in her arms, nobody coming, running on an operating system that was never once designed for these conditions. The exhaustion modern parents feel is not weakness. It is not failure. It is not a character flaw or a lack of gratitude or a sign that something is wrong with you. It is what happens when a species that evolved to raise children collectively is asked to do it in isolation. Your nervous system is sending distress signals because it is operating without the inputs it was built to expect: other hands, other voices, other bodies nearby. The biological signal of safety that comes from being surrounded by people who care whether your child lives. That signal was never supposed to go quiet for 300,000 years. The question was never whether one person could raise a human child alone. The answer to that was always no. The question was whether there were enough people around who cared enough to try. And for every generation before ours, there were. Because the only reason any of us are here is that somewhere in Africa, tens of thousands of years ago, an exhausted mother handed her infant to a grandmother, a neighbor, an aunt, someone, and slept. And the village held the baby until morning. That's it for today. If this made you think about parenting differently, subscribe. There's more where this came from.